Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Giacomo Puccini's Manon Lescaut, which was live streamed from the Metropolitan Opera House and was shown at the Kino in der Kulturbauerei 2 days ago. The conductor was Fabio Luisi, the production was done by Richard Eyre, the set design was handled by Rob Howell, the costumes were done by Fotini Di Mou, the choreographer was Sarah Erda, and the filmographer was Gary Halverson. Now, when it comes to the many opera adaptations of Abbé Prévost's L'Histoire de Chevalier de Grieux et Manon Lescaut, known simply as Manon Lescaut, Giacomo Puccini's version and even that of Jules Massenet's Manon are very much the most well-known adaptations. Yes, there were other ones like Daniel François Esprit Aubert's earlier version composed in 1856, and of course the other version composed in the 1920s, which is Hans Werner Henze's Boulevard Solitude. But these two, mainly Massenet's Manon and Puccini's Manon Lescaut, were very much internationally performed and gained a huge amount of fame, especially when it came to this opera in particular. Now, despite Levilly and Edgar not really having that much of fame, this was the opera that very much put Giacomo Puccini on the map as an opera composer, specifically of that of Verismo. Yes, whenever we think of Giacomo Puccini, we think of his three most famous works, La Bohème, Tosca, and Madama Butterfly. Not a lot of people would talk about Manon Lescaut, even though it has been part of the standard repertoire for quite some time and has enjoyed a lot of success. Basically, for me, I have known this opera for mainly the soprano arias and even the tenor arias, respectively In quelle trine morbide and Sola perduta abbandonata, sung by Manon, and Tra voi belle and Donna non mi vidi mai, sung by De Grieux. So my knowledge of this opera is rather limited, though I have been reading the synopsis from time to time, and it also does stick rather well with the original novel of the tragic couple ending up in Louisiana, and then Manon dying in De Grieux's arms from all the exhaustion and all the famine that she has experienced, and De Grieux really, really feeling so sorrowful that he lost his lover. So now that that's out of the way, let's get on to what I thought about the production. Now, in traditional Manon Lescaut productions, you'd usually expect this opera to take place in the 18th century, where the women and men wore really fancy costumes and really, really lovely powdered wigs. So this took place in, like, I would say the 1920s, 1930s, and everyone is like wearing clothing at the time. You have the women in like a lot of really pretty blouses, and you have the men in like a lot of these fine suits, and some of them are wearing ties for the upper class gentlemen. And there were also a lot of moments in which I really liked the scenery, especially when it came to the second act. I also felt like it was at its best when Manon, De Grieux, and her brother, Lescaut, are basically rushing around the house to avoid being inspected by the police so that they can be able to get out of the house out of Dodge, but unfortunately they get caught. I rather found it really interesting and really liked the choreography done there as well. And, well, that's very much all I can say about it. The production manages to really keep intact with the spirit of the original source material and with the original plot of Puccini's opera. And I also have to say that the costumes were very much gorgeous to look at, especially with Manon's costume. She starts out, well, looking very lovely, wearing her Sunday's best and looks very elegant. And I have to say that Kristine Opolais really did a really fine job acting the role, in which I'll basically talk about her performance much later in this video. But I really have to say that all the costumes in general are very fabulous, very much worth looking at, and there was not one moment in which I thought, oh, this costume piece did not mesh well. I felt like everything went together. I felt like it was able to kind of put Manon Lescaut in like the 1900s, 1920s, and still keep the spirit of the story alive. And now let's get to the singers, the very part I am extremely excited to talk about, as to be expected. Starting out with our title heroine, Manon Lescaut, she was sung by Kristine Opolais, a singer I have been anticipating to listen to. In fact, she was very much the reason why I saw this opera. Now, the thing about Manon Lescaut is that you really need a spinto soprano or a full lyric soprano who can be able to sing all of these really wonderful yet really difficult passages. Let's face it, she sings high B's and high C's in lots of parts in the opera. And there are times that she has to sing lyrically. And when she has to sing dramatically, you better make sure that she has a lot of sound and acting to really give out. And that's what I felt with Kristine Opolais in this particular production of Manon. She looked the part. She really acted the part really well. And what more can you expect? She's been singing this part for quite some time. She's sung this in London, she's sung this in Munich, she's sung this pretty much internationally. In fact, I'd also like to give a shout out to a fellow opera reviewer, Rona Sutton, for also making me rather interested in this particular singer, as I've also seen a couple of videos of her on YouTube, and I was totally excited to see her making her appearance at the Metropolitan Opera House as Manon. And let me just tell you, I am totally blessed to really see someone like Kristine Opolais dominating the stage with her exceptional acting skills, her mellifluous and versatile voice, and her wonderful expressivity. She was able to make a great use of her skill, of her talent, and of everything that she has, and embody it in this really iconic Puccini character. And she did it really fabulously all throughout the evening. Singing the role of her lover, Il Cavaliere di Degreux, known as Renato as well, was Roberto Alagna, a tenor that, no surprise, I've been admiring for quite some time. Heck, I've been admiring him ever since I was 10. Now, the thing about Renato de Grieux is that you need a spinto tenor who can be able to sing a lot of the high notes and really navigate this role with such fine acting chops. And you also have to make sure that the chemistry between him and his Manon are very believable. Well, with Roberto Alagna, what more can you expect from the guy? He does a very fine job in terms of his voice, and in terms of his overall charm, and in terms of how he was able to embody this character. There were times that he was a little bit sharp in some of the high notes that he sang, but that's pretty much forgiven because he still manages to really give out some fine acting chops as to be expected, and he really has a feel for the text, a feel for the notes that he sings. And he definitely embodied this character really well. And then we have the role of Manon's brother, the Count Lescaut, sung by a baritone I have been really wanting to hear for quite some time, Massimo Cavaletti. The thing about Lescaut is that you really need a, what you would call a cavalier baritone, who's basically like, sort of like a lyrical baritone with a lot of dramatic baritone qualities. Any baritone who has sung the likes of Conte di Luna, or any of those noblemen baritone roles, especially the likes of Wolfram von Eschenbach from Tannhäuser, or even that of the Herald from Lohengrin. With Massimo Cavalletti, I really like his voice. I really like the timbre that he was able to give off in terms of how he sings his notes. But if there was one thing I'm not too crazy about, it's his acting. There were times that he was kind of wooden, but he did pick himself up rather well in the later acts. It's just that I wasn't really too crazy about his acting in the first act because I felt like there were moments in which he was kind of flat in his expression. I felt like he was a bit monotone in his expression, but he got a lot better in the later acts. He ended up getting a lot better. He was able to be a lot more involved in the drama. It's just that it took a little bit more time for him. But I will say that his voice is very much a very homogeneous instrument. It has that richness, it has that vivacity, and it has that charisma and brilliance that really make a baritone shine. Which is no surprise because he's also been singing a lot of roles in the lyric, and slowly he has been developing himself into the more dramatic baritone roles. He's been very well known for the likes of Enrico from Lucia di Lammermoor and even that of Malatesta from Don Pasquale. So I could see that from those experiences that he had from those different roles, he's built himself up quite well. Singing the role of Manon's sugar daddy, Geronte de Revoix, was the British basso cantante Brindley Sherritt. Now, the thing about this role is that you kind of need a character bass, or even that of a basso buffo, or at times a basso cantante. It's a very thankless role for any basso, that you really need some character in this role, and you need to also have a good amount of acting chops. Luckily for someone like Brindley Sherritt, he was able to do a very fine job with this role. With a very fine timbre to his voice and a very fine stage presence, I was totally buying him as this character. And I really can't wait to see a lot more of him in the near future because I've heard a lot about this guy. I've even researched a lot about this guy, saying that he also sang a lot of the basso profondo and basso cantante roles, like from Wagner and from a lot of the French composers, the Italian composers. So you could really see that he has built himself up quite well, and it's rather evident in this role. His acting was very fine. His singing was equally as fine, and his stage presence was totally well done. It wasn't too over the top, it wasn't wooden, it was just right. And then we have the smaller roles, starting off with Edmondo, sung by a rising young tenor by the name of Zach Borchevsky. The thing about Edmondo is that, yes, he's attracted a lot of lyric tenors, as opposed to the more spinto quality of De Grieux. And it's a very thankless role for any lyric tenor, for any character tenor. Luckily for the likes of Zach Borchevsky, he was able to sing this thankless role really well, helped with a very fine lyric tenor voice that was so mellifluous, so homogeneous in its registers, and absolutely fine. And he has a very dashing stage presence. And then we have Philip Kokorinos as the innkeeper. Now, with my experience of Philip Kokorinos, I've basically seen him on YouTube singing Mazzetto from Don Giovanni, opposite Sam Raimi as the Don and Ferruccio Furlanetto as Leporello. So, you really have a sense of him being a veteran when it comes to the Met Opera stage, and you could really see the experience that he has in his voice and the experience that he has as a stage actor. It's totally evident. His voice still manages to maintain that roundness and richness, which is no surprise because he's been singing in this very opera house since probably about the late 80s, early 90s. So he still has a very fine timbre all throughout, and his stage presence is equally as fine. Then we have the role of the musician, or the madrigalist, sung by the young French mezzo-soprano Virginia Verret. Now, this role has attracted a lot of lyric mezzos, mostly young lyric mezzos, and with Virginia Verret, I thought she was able to sing her role beautifully, and she is in the company of such other fine singers assisting her, like Maria D'Amato, Christina Thompson Anderson, Stephanie Chigas, and Rosalie Sullivan. Her voice blends well with these wonderful young singers, and I could really see that she has a very bright future ahead of her. So, here's hoping to see a lot more of Miss Verret in the opera stage. Singing the role of the dancing master is Scott Scully. Now, I've never heard of this tenor before, and as I did a little bit of research on him, I also found out that he also sang a great deal of lyric tenor roles, and not just some of the character or Spieltenor roles that he usually specializes in. He's very well known for the likes of Monostatos from Magic Flute, but also the likes of Rodolfo from La Boheme. And I really have to say that his singing has a lot of character. It has that very distinctive sound that really makes character tenors kind of stand out and really make them rather interesting as singers and as stage artists. Then we have the smaller roles of even the dancer performed by Martin Harvey. I thought his stage presence was totally outstanding, even though he didn't really sing anything. And then we have the tiny roles of the sergeant, the lamplighter, and the captain, sung respectively by Brandon Sadel, Andrew Bidlick, and Richard Bernstein. Now, with Brandon Sadel, he really has a bright future, as I could really hear a very fine timbre to his bass baritone voice. Andrew Bidlick has a very fine light lyric tenor voice, which he was able to use very well, even though this character was really thankless. And with Richard Bernstein, he's also a veteran in terms of the experience he has had on stage. So you could really see that experience that he has in both his singing and his acting. So I really felt like the singing all throughout was really well done. And special kudos goes to the main heroine, Manon Lescaut, sung by Kristine Opolais, who basically had loads and loads of experience with this role. And every time, she's finding something very new to this role, and I'm absolutely very thrilled to see someone like Madame Opolais really perform this role to the best of her abilities. The conducting done by Fabio Luisi was very much fine all around, and especially when it comes to the Met Chorus. I felt like everyone did a very fine job all throughout, and I was totally having a blast with this particular production. So overall, I really have to say that the Metropolitan Opera House does it once again with a very fine production of yet another Puccini opera. I really like the singing, I like the production, I like the costumes, I like the conducting, everything about it. Everything was just so well handled, and everyone really went together, and I could really see that everyone from the singers and the conductor, the orchestra players, everyone there seemed to have a very jolly good time. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in for another review. So until then, good night, everybody. And I do apologize that this review came out 2 days late, so I hope you guys forgive me for that. Good night.